Unbowed, unbent, unbroken. These are the words of House Martell. Their house sigil is a golden spear piercing a red sun on an orange field. They are the Lords of Sunspear, and title their house's leader as Prince or Princess rather than simply Lord. In this video, we'll discuss the history of House Martell before Game of Thrones, and what led to them being so unique. As always, there are some spoilers in this lore video for both A Song of Ice and Fire and the Game of Thrones television shows. The Andals were a race of men from Andalos in Essos. Many years ago, they migrated to Westeros and invaded the lands of the First Men. Morgan Martell, an Andal explorer, established the first settlement of House Martell when the Andals first came to Dorne. This settlement was located between the mouth of the Greenblood River and the Broken Arm. As a result of Morgan's leadership, the local First Men, including the houses Wade and Shell, were defeated, and he established his dominion over a strip of land that was 50 leagues long and 10 leagues wide. The Martells were vassals to the monarchs of houses Jourdain, Illyrian, and Ironwood, in addition to being petty kings of the Greenblood River, but they did not govern as kings. House Martell were one of Dorne's minor governing houses during the Rhoynish Wars. When the Rhoynish warrior Queen Nymeria arrived, House Ironwood were still a stronger house than the Martells. Everything changed once Lord of the Martells, Mors Martell, married Nymeria. Together, they successfully waged a war to unite Dorne under their banner. This would come to be known as Nymeria's War, starting a history of Martell reverence for female nobles that was rather uncommon in Westeros. The Martells abandoned numerous Andal customs for Rhoynar once after their merger. Nymeria named her husband Prince of Dorne instead of King, and their estates and title would be passed to the oldest child, regardless of their gender. In this case, their daughter inherited rulership of Dorne. Rhoynish tradition and architectural design also led to the building of the Spear Tower and the Tower of the Sun. Together they formed the old royal palace of Sunspear. The Martells ruled Dorne without much conflict until Aegon Targaryen came to Westeros. Aegon sought to conquer all of Westeros and united under one banner. This included Dorne. Queen Rhaenys Targaryen met Mirria Martell at Sunspear during Aegon's conquest. Mirria refused to bow to King Aegon. Rhaenys left Dorne after Mirria rejected the Targaryens, but the two houses were destined for conflict. 4 years later, the Targaryens returned, igniting the First Dornish War. When Targaryen forces reached the Palace of Sunspear, they declared themselves victorious. Princess Mirria was nowhere to be found, and it was assumed that she had fled. King Aegon installed a new Lord of Sunspear named Jon Rosby. Aegon, Rhaenys, and all of their forces returned to King's Landing. Once the palace was lacking the full might of the Targaryen army, Mirria reappeared with her forces and quickly retook the capital. After their victory, Princess Mirria hurled Lord Rosby from the top of the Spear Tower. As word reached Aegon of this vengeful treachery, he resolved to continue the war with Dorne. The war became a protracted war that led to a great deal of suffering in Dorne. Nearly every military target in Dorne burned at least once during the war, with the exception of Sunspear itself. For 9 long years the war went on, but Aegon never rode his dragons anywhere near Sunspear. The Dornish fighting forces had managed to kill Merax's, Queen Rhaenys' dragon. Rhaenys died along with it. It seemed Aegon feared the same thing could happen to his dragon as well. Aegon's hope was that by making the Dornish people suffer that they'd eventually rise up against the Martells and rebel. This sentiment never managed to take hold, and the Dornish people held fast after every relentless assault from Aegon's forces. Finally, Princess Mirria died. Her son, Prince Nymer, was not as hot-blooded as his mother. Prince Nymer was ready for peace. He sent his daughter and a peace delegation to King's Landing, as well as the skull of Rhaenys' dragon. Upon reading the letter that Prince Nymer wrote, King Aegon agreed to peace. King's Landing and Sunspear became allies. Sunspear even treated King Aegon and his heir to a feast at Sunspear to celebrate their friendship a decade after the war ended. Not much is known about what was going on in Dorne after Aegon's conquest until the Dance with Dragons, but Dorne did always show a bit of contempt for the allies of the throne. For example, when the Triarchy warred with the Velaryons, the Martells supported the Triarchy. Other than that, there were whispers of attempts at conquest through peace. A century after the First Dornish War, King Viserys considered marrying his daughter to a Martell, but this never happened. Finally, nearly a century and a half after the First Dornish War, King Daeron Targaryen sought to finish the Targaryen conquest of Westeros and take over Dorne once and for all. With no dragons at his back, Daeron's advisors thought this feat to be impossible. Daeron studied the tactics used in the First Dornish War. He knew the Dornish people set traps on the roads and skirmished with invaders to make conquest a harrowing affair. Daeron avoided these mistakes by using paths and trails to avoid main roads. He also had the Tyrells attack in a separate force as well as the royal fleet attack by sea. Daeron's assault led to a surprisingly quick victory in Dorne, with Prince Martell bending the knee at last. The Dornish people and the Martells would not be easy to rule. Hot-blooded and vengeful, the people of Dorne continued to engage in rebellion, and even attempted to assassinate King Daeron. Daeron at last left Dorne, and left the Tyrells behind to end the rebellion. When the rebellions did not end, King Daeron returned to Dorne with his forces and achieved several victories. The Dornish sued for peace with Daeron, but betrayed him at the meeting. King Daeron was killed, and his brother was captured. The small folk of Dorne once again looked to the Martells for leadership, and they resumed rulership over the land from Sunspear. Daeron's successor, King Baelor, immediately sought peace with the Martells. This peace was sealed with a betrothal between the future king, Daeron II, and Princess Myrria of Dorne. When Myrria became queen and Daeron II ascended, her brother Meryn Martell agreed to join the Seven Kingdoms peacefully. This is why the Martells have the words unbowed, unbent, unbroken. They refused to be conquered until a princess of Dorne became queen, and never bent the knee in earnest. They always made would-be conquerors pay for every attempted invasion. The Martells and other Dornish houses continued to increase in power after their entry into the Seven Kingdoms, and supported the king during the Blackfyre Rebellion. They continued to have a great deal of sway at court in King's Landing for many years. Less than a generation before the events of Game of Thrones, Princess Martell of Dorne brought her children on a tour of Westeros with the intent of finding them potential suitors. At Casterly Rock, the princess suggested a match between Cersei or Jaime to one of her children, Oberyn or Elia. Tywin Lannister refused, offering his dwarf son Tyrion instead. The princess took this as an insult. It was the first of many insults that the Lannisters would inflict on the Martells in the years to come. The Martells won one over on the Lannisters when a betrothed to future King Rhaegar was named. Tywin Lannister had thought his daughter Cersei would be named, but instead it was Elia Martell. Elia married Rhaegar and they had 2 children. Rhaegar embarrassed the Martells at the tourney at Harrenhal when he won the tournament. Instead of praising his wife Elia, he passed her over for Lyanna Stark. This public show of affection infuriated Robert Baratheon, who was in love with Lyanna. A year later, things came to a head when Lyanna went missing, apparently abducted by Rhaegar. This led to Robert rounding up several houses and rebelling against the Targaryens. Having been embarrassed by Rhaegar multiple times at this point, Prince Doran Martell was very slow to support the Targaryens. Still, with his sister and her children in King's Landing, he could not completely refuse aid to the throne. Doran sent his forces to the Battle of the Trident. This battle was a decisive defeat for the allies of the Martells, even leading to the death of Doran's uncle, as well as Rhaegar. Before the month was out, the Lannisters arrived with their forces at King's Landing. Thinking they were there to protect the city, the king let them inside the gates. Instead, Tywin's army sacked the city. The king was killed. Not wanting any question of heirs, Tywin's forces went after Elia and her 2 young children. Sir Gregor Clegane and Sir Amory Lorts were sent to do the deed. Clegane defiled Elia Martell and then killed her. He then killed her children as well. As Robert Baratheon ascended to the Iron Throne, rumors of what had happened at King's Landing spread to Dorne. The Martells and Dornish people were not quick to forget that so much of their own blood had been spilled for others, and that a princess of Dorne had been defiled by a Lannister knight. When Oberyn Martell learned that there were Targaryens still alive in Essos, he asked his brother Doran to rise in rebellion against the throne and support them. Doran and the Hand of the King Jon Arryn had great diplomatic relations, and so Doran did not want to act openly, despite his anger over the situation. Despite this, both Oberyn and Doran began to plot in secret to find a way to punish House Lannister. Their plan for revenge begins to play out throughout the Game of Thrones series. You can pick up their story in the A Song of Ice and Fire novels or the Game of Thrones television show. The Martells have a reason to be angered by every side during Robert's rebellion. What should they have done? Let us know in the comments.
Thanks for watching. For more lore about everything, please subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment for what lore topic you want us to cover next. See you in the next video.